Dinosaurs, Jehovah's Witnesses. Dinosaurs, Jehovah's Witnesses. You probably clicked on this video assuming the title was shameless clickbait, but you'd be wrong. You see, my patrons have requested that I make this video, and for a very good reason. Throughout the 140-year history of the religion, whenever Jehovah's Witnesses have attempted to write anything informative about T-Rexes, Stegosauruses and Triceratopses, and all their scaly contemporaries, they have always said something that is at best untrue and at worst downright ridiculous. And so in this video, I will be furnishing you the viewer with no fewer than 10 examples of my former religion saying silly things about dinosaurs. To get the backdrops and b-roll that this important subject deserves, I've come to the most fitting location that the John Cedars channel can afford, Dino Park Fontana, a Croatian theme park strewn with unconvincing fiberglass dinosaurs that will also keep my two small children entertained for a few hours while Daddy delivers some pieces to camera in a way that's relevant to a modern YouTube audience.
With a great big hug and a kiss from me to you, won't you say you love me too?
Dinosaurs live alongside humans.
Dinosaurs like this customer were pushing up daisies yonks before humans rolled up in the hood, so unless their name happens to be Barney, no dinosaur has ever encountered a human, let alone tried to exploit their craving for childhood fame by stringing them along with hollow claims of love. But try telling that to writers of early Jehovah's Witness magazines, who were confused on the subject to say the least. For example, in 1923, the editors of the Golden Age allowed a crackpot named Samuel Hubbard to publish an article effectively requesting funding for an expedition to prove the existence of antediluvian giants, the Nephilim said to have been wiped out in Noah's flood. The same Hubbard elsewhere famously claimed that this pictogram from a cliff wall in Arizona was not just some random squiggle, but an early depiction of a dinosaur rearing on its hind legs. And in his 1920s GoFundMe-style Golden Age article, Hubbard reproduced a letter from one of his contemporaries, a William D. Tenbrook, commenting on wall paintings of supposed Mesozoic reptiles.
The pictures were either drawn from the imaginations of the artists, or there were scientists in those days who were able to reconstruct fossil remains which they discovered, or there were species of men living contemporaneously with these creatures, and thus capable of preserving a record. It seems particularly easy for me to accept the last hypothesis.
By 1973, there was still indecision as to whether the Flintstones was more history than fiction.
If the Hebrew expression translated great sea monsters, or Hebrew Tananim, includes dinosaurs, which often inhabited swampy, watery areas, this would mean that dinosaurs were created on the fifth day. We do not know whether they continued to exist until man was created, toward the close of the sixth day. At the very latest, it seems likely that they must have disappeared off the earth at the time of the flood of Noah's day.
Even as late as 1990, this Awake article, which I vividly remember reading as a boy, refused to rule out the possibility of man and dinosaur coexisting.
The book, A Vanished World, The Dinosaurs of Western Canada, states that all of the 11 major kinds of dinosaurs ceased to exist in the western interior at about the same time. This, and the fact that human bones have not been found with dinosaur bones, is why most scientists conclude that the age of dinosaurs ended before humans came on the scene. However, it should be noted that there are some who say that dinosaur bones and human bones are not found together because dinosaurs did not live in areas of human habitation. Such differing views demonstrate that the fossil record does not yield its secrets so easily, and that no one on Earth today really knows all the answers.
during Noah's flood.
As we have already seen, Watchtower writers of yore seemed more than open to the idea of man coexisting with dinosaurs at least up to the flood of Noah's day. This is probably why dinosaurs make cameos alongside humans in maps of the ancient world printed in Watchtower publications of the 50s and 60s. Notably, the 1958 book From Paradise Lost to Paradise Regained and early editions of the Witness Bible, the New World Translation. The 1982 brochure Enjoy Life on Earth Forever even depicts a dinosaur drowning in the floodwaters as Noah's Ark floats off in the distance. In case you're wondering, the same picture appears minus the dino in the 1978 children's book My Book of Bible Horrors. Stories. Anyway, anyone who knows anything about dinosaurs knows it's preposterous to suggest that they were still hanging around as recently as 2370 BCE, which is put forward as the year of Noah's flood in JW publications. But if you were a Watchtower writer or artist in the late 50s through to the early 80s, you could only have assumed dinosaurs survived up to Noah's flood if you'd been filling your head with what was printed in the organisation's magazines from previous decades. Remember that Hubbard guy with the dinosaur cave painting? That was referenced again in a 1927 Golden Age that made a very assertive claim about the flood.
Wall pictures discovered in Arizona by the Doheny Scientific Expedition under the direction of Samuel Hubbard, curator of archaeology of the Oakland, California Museum, show an elephant attacking a large man standing in the water up to his knees. They also picture ibex and the dinosaur, the latter in an upright position. No ibex are now to be found in the Western Hemisphere, and the dinosaurs and all American elephants perished in the flood, so that it seems reasonable to hold that these wall writings or pictographs antedated that event.
Dinosaurs and mammoths lived together at the same time.
If you were a woolly mammoth chillaxing 800k to 4k years ago, the last thing you'd expect to see is a big ass dino like this getting all up in your business. That's because the homies from Jurassic Park have been dirt napping for a buttload of years. I'm talking 66 million, but JW writers from the 1940s had other ideas. One thing that becomes obvious when trawling through early Watchtower literature is that the writers assumed mammoths and dinosaurs lived together. We've already seen a Golden Age article from 1927 confidently asserting that dinosaurs perished in the flood alongside so-called American elephants, and a colour illustration in the 1943 book The Truth Shall Make You Free clearly depicts dinosaurs living in the same period as mammoths and saber-toothed tigers.
The animals went in 2 by 2, hurrah, hurrah. The animals went in 2 by 2, hurrah.
Noah might have taken lizards on the ark instead of dinosaurs.
We've all been there. A psychotic god decides to kill everyone on the planet apart from you and your family. And rather than doing this just by snapping his fingers, he decides drowning every last mofo with more water than exists on our world is a more efficient method. You're therefore tasked with making a large wooden box that can preserve not only you and your family, but over 6 million land-dwelling species. There's just one problem. If Noah is instructed to make room for all living things, and dinosaurs are still around at that time, what's he going to do about them? I mean, many dinosaurs aren't exactly petite. But worry not, a 1973 Watchtower had the solution. It turns out you don't need to preserve millions of species, you only need to preserve hundreds of kinds, so that all the different species can evolve back again at a rate faster than the science of natural selection allows. Since lizards are vaguely connected to dinosaurs, all Noah needed to do was catch 2 of those slithery customers and hey presto, it was mission accomplished.
Dinosaurs were reptiles, and some kinds of dinosaurs bear strong resemblance structurally and otherwise to lizards. Sauros is, in fact, the Greek word for lizard. Saura, found in Leviticus 11:29, Septuagint version. Not all types of dinosaurs were of such gigantic size. Hence, even if they had survived till the flood, This would not have required taking pairs of the mammoth varieties into the ark. Other smaller members of the particular family or kind to which these belonged would have sufficed to fulfill the divine command.
Who built the ark? Noah, Noah. Who built the ark? Brother Noah built the ark.
Fossil remains were caused by the flood of Genesis.
Yo, scientists, get out of my face with all your crazy shares about fossils being formed over thousands of years. I get my scientific information from Christian fundamentalist periodicals, and they tell me you're spreading lies. Though it must by now seem almost trivial compared to other ludicrous pseudo-scientific claims we're considering, it's worth noting that the writers of the Golden Age, the forerunner to the Awake magazine, flatly claimed in 1929 that millions of fossil remains were caused by the flood, before proceeding to describe ancient remains that don't sound remotely like fossils. As the National Geographic puts it, fossils are not the remains of the organism itself, they are rocks. But according to the Golden Age writers, fossils could be anything found in the ground that might support the Noah story.
Millions of the fossil remains now in the earth were caused by the flood of Noah's day. In northern Siberia, an antelope was found embedded in the ice. It had green grass in its stomach, which proved that its death occurred suddenly while it was feeding. Similarly, a mastodon was found embedded in ice with food between its teeth. Parts of this mastodon were eaten by dogs and even by human beings, showing that it had kept perfectly during the 4,000 years it was in cold storage. Eventually, the students of fossil remains must recognize the flood and the creator who sent it. But oh, how they hate to do it.
You might be thinking this quote from the late 20s was a one-off, but as recently as 1975, the Awake writers were selectively quoting from sources like Earth's Most Challenging Mysteries to argue for fossils being evidence of Noah's flood.
There is one significant fact that is always connected with every dinosaur fossil and every mammoth fossil, and that is that every fossil is almost invariably dug out of water-laid sedimentary rock. Every fossil is either dug out of shale, which is just floodwater mud hardened into rock, or out of floodwater sand hardened into sandstone or frozen into permafrost.
Quotes like this, not so subtly suggesting that every single fossil of either a dinosaur or mammoth indicates drowning by some divine deluge, are strewn throughout Watchtower literature and are too numerous to list in this video. In reality, fossils are formed by waterborne minerals gradually replacing bone material that happens to have been covered by layers of sediment, leaving behind a rock replica of the original bone. This is a process that takes thousands or millions of years. Fossils are simply not formed by sudden acts of destruction by a vengeful god.
Dinosaurs may have been the dragons of legend.
Unless your name's Daenerys Targaryen, the closest you'll ever get to riding on a dragon is on a theme park ride like this one. That's because, unlike dinosaurs, flying, fire-breathing medieval monsters never existed.
But Watchtower writers of 1973 had other ideas.
Some of the older translations of the Bible at times use the word dragons to translate the Hebrew Tananim, or sea monsters in the New World Translation. The term dragon is found in the Christian Greek scriptures. It has been suggested as possible that rather than having a purely mythical source, this expression may originally have been applied to enormous creatures such as the dinosaurs, taking on mythical tones only after these mammoth creatures had long disappeared. Interestingly, many of the mythical depictions of the dragon strongly resemble certain types within the family of huge reptilian creatures that include the dinosaur.
To be fair, Watchtower writers were not alone in drawing these parallels. In her book The First Fossil Hunters, published in 2000, Historian Adrian Mayer argued that stories of dragons in places like Greece, India and China may have been inspired by ancient discoveries of fossils of dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals. Unlike Watchtower, her theory involved the discovery of fossils by ancient civilizations rather than any thinly veiled attempt at suggesting dinosaurs and humans once coexisted.
There might have been dinosaurs on Venus.
If you rocked up on Venus for your next vacay, chances are you wouldn't last long enough to post your first Instagram selfie. That's because the place averages 450 degrees C at the equator, and the atmosphere is made up of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide and sulfuric acid. Yeah, you heard me. Mother flipping acid. And if that's not bad enough, the atmospheric pressure is so off the scale it could crush a dino like this like a tin can. It seems none of this was considered by the Golden Age writers of 1931 when, apparently under the influence of amphetamines, they indulged the idea that dinosaurs might be living on our hellish planetary neighbour.
It will be very apparent to readers of Judge Rutherford's book Creation that the present condition of Venus is about what the Earth was prior to the flood, and it is significant that some astronomers have advanced the idea that animals, like the dinosaurs that once roamed this planet, are now finding Venus a happy place in which to live.
That is one big pile of shit.
Dinosaurs were killed by collapsing wings.
Meet the homie Isaac Newton Vail, described on Wikipedia as an American Quaker, schoolteacher and pseudoscientist supporting the theory of catastrophism. His ideas were taken up by creationists including Jehovah's Witnesses. That's right, JW Spiritual Food once pushed the crackpot ideas of a random school teacher with outrageous sideburns who believed in Saturn-like belts collapsing one by one when God was creating the Earth. I could try explaining this so-called Valiant Theory for you, but who better to do it than Charles Taze Russell himself, founder of the religion that came to be known as Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's listen in as he speaks from beyond the grave in his 1914 motion picture, The Photodrama of Creation.
The account of the days of creation given in Genesis relates not to the construction of our globe, but to the ordering of it for human habitation. There are various theories regarding its formation. We follow the one most closely harmonizing with the Bible. It is called the Valiant Theory. It assumes that Saturn's rings and Jupiter's belts illustrate Earth's development as a planet. The Earth was once molten, as indicated by the igneous rocks of the Azoic period, so called by scientists but not discussed in the Bible. When the Earth was molten, its water and minerals were thrown off a great distance in gaseous form. As these cooled and took shape, they constituted great rings at a distance from the Earth. Gradually, the motion of the rings became different from that of the Earth in proportion to the distance from the center of gravity. These rings of water and mineral, gradually approaching the Earth, would be kept off by centrifugal force, particularly strong at the equator. There are scientists who claim that the Earth still has one ring about it, an electrical ring, which, falling, will in a few years destroy fermentation, microbes and parasites, and greatly assist plant and animal life.
Though nearly all Jehovah's Witnesses have heard of the photodrama of creation and consider it to be a shining example of their religion's early ingenuity in using technology to spread the good news, because they haven't actually watched it, they don't know what utter nonsense it contains. Almost inevitably, even some of the most fanciful notions entertained by Russell's eccentric mind came to be passed on. In particular, his bizarre infatuation with the Valiant Theory continued to inspire Watchtower writers for decades after his death, as can be seen in the 1943 book The Truth Shall Make You Free.
During this fifth creative day, There may have been a falling of further belts of the aqueous canopy at the poles, resulting this time in the destruction of animal or creature life by the icy waters, some forms of animal life being wiped out which do not exist today. What forms of animal souls were first to be created on this sixth creative day is not stated. Doubtless, some forms whose fossils or petrified remains have been found embedded deep in the earth were destroyed by further falling belts from the canopy and by the resulting inundations rushing down like tidal waves from the poles. The creative day not being 24 hours long, but several thousand years long, Jehovah's power would replenish the earth with animal life of like or new kinds.
As difficult as this may be for modern witnesses to stomach, until at least 1947 the so-called faithful slave continued to quote from Isaac Vale in support of his mad ideas about falling Saturn-like belts. Why? Because even though his theories had absolutely no basis in science, at least they supported their narrative of a relatively young Earth. It's at this point in our list from 1 to 10 that I need to point out that all the things written about dinosaurs I've covered so far have never been officially retracted in Jehovah's Witness publications, but for at least a few decades they haven't been repeated either. They've become what I like to call ghost teachings, embarrassing remnants from watchtowers past that the organisation refuses to kill off, seemingly hoping that they'll instead just get buried by the sands of time. The final two items on our list, however, are not ghost teachings. In fact, they're so brand new that they appear on the official jw.org website on their dedicated page, What Does the Bible Say About Dinosaurs?
Dinosaurs appeared suddenly, not gradually.
Imagine you're a creationist like Ken Ham or Ray Comfort, and you believe that God created all living things in a relatively short space of time because the Bible says so. And as we all know, Iron Age scribes will have known more about the origins of our planet and all living things than, say, modern scientists. The point is, to believe in the creation story, you need all life forms to have been created pretty much all at once. After all, why would an intelligent designer create things slowly over vast eons of time when he could just snap his fingers and make it happen? There's also the small problem of the origin of man. If creationists give ground by admitting that life evolves gradually over long periods of time, don't they also need to be at least open to the possibility that humans arose by the exact same processes? And this being the case, what can be said about the Garden of Eden story and the validity of the entire Genesis narrative? It's much easier to dismiss mountains of evidence that man is a product of natural selection and claim evolution to be a lie. To do this, you need creation to be over and done with as quickly as possible. Behold, the very latest wisdom from the jw.org article, What Does the Bible Say About Dinosaurs?
Did dinosaurs evolve from other animals? Rather than appearing gradually, as if by evolution, dinosaurs appeared abruptly in the fossil record. This harmonizes with Bible statements showing that God created all the animals. For example, Psalm 146 verse 6 describes God as the maker of heaven and earth, of the sea, and of all that is in them.
The trouble is, the fossil record doesn't show all dinosaurs suddenly emerging at the same time. As this illustration shows, dinosaurs first appeared in the Triassic period, with various species evolving and going extinct throughout the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, a time period spanning 180 million years. You only need to look at some dinosaurs to see evolution in progress, as with the impossibly small arms on the T-Rex, which most scientists consider to have been vestigial remnants from evolutionary ancestors. A bit like wisdom teeth in humans, or the tails that some babies are born with. It can even be argued that dinosaurs as a group never really went extinct and are still with us today in the form of birds, which are technically avian dinosaurs. But their stubborn insistence that dinosaurs emerged from thin air is not the only example of modern Watchtower writers continuing to be clueless on the subject.
Dinosaurs lived only thousands of years ago.
Triceratopses like this bad boy could grow up to 9 meters in length, or if you prefer, 9,000 millimeters. I know what you're all thinking. No fool needs to know the length of a dinosaur like this in millimeters. It would be like describing months in terms of minutes or tens of millions of years in terms of thousands of years. Well, here again is where Watchtower writers simply cannot help being silly when it comes to pushing their creationist ideas. Ever since the earliest beginnings of the religion, Watchtower leaders have been pushing the idea that the Earth's age can be measured in not millions or billions of years, but mere thousands. As Charles Taze Russell put it in his photodrama,
It was toward the close of the 6th day, or approximately 42,000 years from the time of beginning the ordering of earth, that God created man.
Your ears do not deceive you. Russell was here insisting that Earth went from being a featureless lump of rock to being the planet we know today in only 42,000 years. Whereas young Earth creationists like Ken Ham insist the Earth was created 6,000 years ago over 6 literal 24-hour days, Russell only slightly more generously interpreted the creative days to be periods of 7,000 years. 7,000 times by 6 equals 42,000. It was based on this idea of 7,000-year creative days that Watchtower Society Secretary W.E. Van Amberg wrote the following about dinosaurs in his 1924 book, The Way to Paradise.
During the fifth 7,000-year day, there appeared sea life of all kinds, and birds of great varieties and numbers. In the museums are to be found skeletons of some of the monsters of those early ages, such as the Ichthyosaurus and Gigantosaurus. Fossils of the latter have been found 160 feet long. As these monsters lived and died, their bodies added to the fertility of the soil, thus preparing for the next epoch.
Yes, we can add that to our list. Dinosaurs were God's master plan for fertilizing Earth's prehistoric soil. Joking aside, it can't be stressed enough that this was so-called spiritual food of its time, considered by witnesses today to have been published by God's faithful slave only 5 years after it was invisibly chosen by Jesus in 1919. This particular book is even on display at the new Jehovah's Witness headquarters at Warwick, New York, alongside a reproduction of a dinosaur illustration from its pages. But because it's conveniently behind glass, witnesses touring the facility can't pick up the book and sample its wisdom for themselves. Amazingly, Russell's mad idea that the Earth was thrown together in only 42,000 years continued to be asserted in Watchtower materials right up to the 1970s, as this rather awkward illustration from a 1973 Watchtower shows. The 1946 book, Equipped for Every Good Work, which, like The Way to Paradise, is difficult for witnesses to consult because it isn't on jw.org, didn't mince words.
Genesis is the most ancient history in the world. The first verse reaches far back into time, saying with impressive simplicity, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." 26 short verses later, and 42,000 long years have elapsed. God's creative work in 7,000-year days has been described. Day and night, descension of rings, the appearance of dry land, and the gathering of seas, plant life, light to rule by day and by night, animal life, followed by higher forms of land animals, topped finally by the creation of man and woman. All these miraculous events of 42,000 years pass fleetingly before the eyes.
Because this notion of the Earth being only thousands of years old is so deeply rooted in Jehovah's Witness theology from its earliest beginnings, the religion's writers today still cannot help but talk about life on Earth as being only thousands of years old, even though scientists consider the earliest life to have emerged at least 3.5 billion years ago. Let's go back to the very latest article on dinosaurs and see what it says about when dinosaurs lived.
When did the dinosaurs live? The Bible describes sea and land animals as being created during the 5th and 6th days or epochs of creation. Thus, the Bible allows for the appearance and existence of dinosaurs over a lengthy period of time.
Perhaps you noticed a small asterisk next to the word creation in this quote. What happens if we click on it?
The footnote reads, "In the Bible, the word day can refer to periods of time that last thousands of years."
And there we have it. Over 100 years after Russell's mad ramblings in the photo drama, and the organisation he founded is still fixated with creative days that are only thousands of years in length. You simply don't talk about creatures that lived and died tens, if not hundreds of millions of years ago, in terms of only thousands of years. This again is a gross understatement akin to measuring meters in millimeters or miles in inches. But because Jehovah's Witnesses are a fundamentalist, creationist sect only a hop, skip and a jump away from Ken Ham and his bonkers Ark encounter, we shouldn't be at all surprised when we scratch beneath the surface and see that their grasp of science and respect for the scientific method is just as tenuous. I'm Lloyd Evans and you've been watching me here at the Dino Park Fontana in Istria, Croatia. All that remains is for me to thank my amazing patrons for voting for me to cover this topic. If you've enjoyed this video, and why wouldn't you, please don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more like it, and as always, thank you for watching. Really is a bit crap. Get out of my face with all your crazy shiz about fossils being formed out of thousands of... Go.
Dinosaurs and mammoths lived together.
This one actually reminds me of David's Splain. Right, okay. Your line is...
Unless your name's Daenerys Targaryen, the closest you'll ever get to riding...
Fossil remains are caused by the flood of Genesis.
And rather than doing this just by snapping his fingers, he decides... Shut up!